Hey folks! Let's cover today an interesting game from 2002 made by Fanatics Development, Zenzera The Hidden Portal. This game has piqued my interest for years, because it's, simply put, a sort of Western answer to Pokémon. It's an ambitious project that wasn't very successful at the time of release, but over time it has become a small cult with a large following, and there's even a fun remake that's been going on for many years by a Russian fan, which looks spectacular. By the way, in Zenzera we play as Amy, a girl living in London that, on the day of her 18th birthday, is visited by a mysterious creature from another world, which leaves her a present. A teleporting rune that permits her to travel to the fairy world of Zenzera. Yes, it's basically an isekai. By the way, Amy was chosen by the Goblin Rafi as the prophesied human heroine that will restore balance to the world of Zenzera, where suddenly obstacles of various kinds appeared and blocked the paths. The Dark Elves have left their hunter world and now threaten the peace of others, and the once helpful fairies have become wild and aggressive, and thus Amy starts her quest to become the greatest fairy master and save Zenzera. Okay, it's not the most original story ever told, but it's functional, and later we'll have to choose one of 3 available fairies as our starter. And this is just the first of many similarities with Pokémon. As the first fairy, I chose Sylvia, a nature type that is quite balanced. See, the game features 12 types of fairies for a total of 77 creatures, and the good thing is that the starters are easily obtainable later on as a compensation for a quest or a wild encounter to capture, so do not fear to lose the chance to acquire something super rare, because all fairies can be obtained with the necessary patience and will. Just like in Pokémon, fairies acquire experience points and level up to the 60th level, and most of them can evolve up to 2 times in a more powerful version when they reach the required level. Well, except maybe only Cilia, which first evolves in the powerful Viteria, but then the third form Boneria has lower stats because of reasons, and I wish I had known this sooner. Certain fairies will even evolve by using on them elemental stones, and there's this funny looking one, Tinefall, that like the Pokémon Eevee has 3 different evolutions: Fire, Water and Nature. Evolving him in Tinezard will be the fastest way to acquire a fire type, that otherwise will be available only near the end of the game. So far, Zenzera is definitely influenced by Pokémon, but what distinguishes it is mainly the combat system, in which the battles within fairies take place in arenas, where we take control of our fairy in first person. Imagine an arena FPS with a chargeable jetpack, like the old series Stripes. There are 11 different arenas depending on the opponent's level, and the scope is to fire chargeable spells at the enemy until he faints. Learning the layout of the arenas will help dodging a takeover from the enemy attacks, though the most of them will be almost impossible to avoid. Also, every fairy has the jump ability that is like the mentioned jetpack, which power and speed of recharge depend from its level and basic stats. Flying around the arenas is a key feature that determines most battles, and running out of energy can make the fairy fall into the void and lose. Now, talking about the offensive and defensive spells, fairies do not learn them by simply leveling up. Instead, a fairy acquires magic slots in which we must put the desired spell that must be buffed by the spell merchants scattered around Zenzera. These curious creatures create sets of 5 random spells at a time at the cost of 10 coins, and they can be a freaking scam, because some slots, or even all 5, can be blank, and we'll have to pay them many times to generate sets containing new spells. Furthermore, all merchants sell 2 or 3 types of magic, so in order to acquire the air, light, or the then fire elements, we'll first have to reach the right places in the main quest. And I said the then fire magic because I missed the location where to buy it and I discovered it after too many hours. However, what can make the difference during battles are the status alterations triggered by the critical damages, like poisoning or burn, and even decrease the charging speed of the opponent's spells. Next to the offensive spells, there are various passive abilities, like Shapeless Power, which can nullify the enemy's criticals and thus prevent status alterations, while others can increase the base damage or the jump energy recovery speed. We can create two sets of spells interchangeable during battles, and we must learn to exploit the Joker slots. In short, many fairies will have the possibility to use the spells of a different element if they possess these multicolored slots here, and by assigning the passive water spell Shapeless Power, which I previously mentioned, will decidedly ease the whole experience. See, status effects are the worst annoyance, and become unable to attack or even to fly for several seconds will make us lose many battles like nothing. Anyway, the spells have limited uses in the form of magic points, and when a fairy consumes all the MPs of an offensive spell, it will then consume its own life force to attack, while the passive abilities will just stop having effect. To restore the magic points, we must consume mana potions, or interact with the scarecrow near the cottage, that will replenish them for free after helping him against some pests. Leveling up also replenishes the 50% of the magic points, and fully heals the fairy, whose HPs can be recovered by consuming health potions, and before venturing in a new area we should always stack many recovery items from merchants. Unlike the magic points, there's not an easy way to fully recover the HPs for free, except entering this magic lake which heals just a bit, and we need to re-enter the area to use it again. And it's quite a chore. And besides, a fainted fairy can be revived only by using the healing herbs, which can be bought for very cheap in the village of Dunmore after certain events. Capture the fairies is kinda simple. First we need in our inventory the magic spheres divided in 3 tiers: silver, gold and crystal. When the wild fairies' HPs are very low, a message will show up and we just need to collide with her to end the battle, and luckily we are given then the choice to keep the captured fairy or release it in the case of error. An interesting and perhaps unique feature of this game is that the level of the captured fairy will be just a third of the one encountered, and we'll have to train her in order to make her powerful and evolve. I found it a nice idea. Now let's talk about other things. Zenzera outside of battles works like a classic adventure game, in which we can perform simple interactions, explore and jump. The game world is composed by simple and mostly linear full 3D environments, where sometimes we can make appear platforms to jump on in order to reach some hidden items, though the jumps are sometimes clunky and imprecise, and to my surprise I discovered that this can happen. Also this. And even this.
Ouch!
And I thought it was just a light-hearted fling. Whatever happens, there's no real game over. Amy just re-enters the latest area where she died or lost all her fairies, and the same goes for when we reload the game. We restart from the beginning of the map with the status and eventually defeat the enemy trainers of the time we saved progress. And yes, I said enemy trainers, because the game is also full of other characters who train fairies to battle, and many of them are mandatory to defeat in order to progress the main quest. Some trainers are part of challenges which lead to key items and new areas, while others can be the menacing Dark Elves. The battles against the trainers are a bit different. We cannot escape, and the opponent will have the habit of changing his fairies continuously, making things more tedious. And aside trainers, sometimes we have to battle groups of fairies who will fight all together on the field and not one at a time. And personally, I found these encounters quite fun. Returning to the exploration, Zenzera does a good job in giving a sense of progression to the player. The obstacles that block the passages will be overcome by obtaining special objects that reflect some types of fairies. The Fairy Card of Nature allows to eliminate the spiky bushes that block some roads. Just place a nature type fairy in the first place, and then watch her take care of it. The same can be done with the boulders, that will be destroyed by the rock-type fairies after obtaining the Fairy Card of Earth. In the advanced stages of the main quest, Amy will also get the Fairy Card of Air and of Fire. The first permits her to exploit these vortices to make big leaps and reach special objects, or restricted areas, and the second to resist the extreme heat in the lava pits. These cards are an original equivalent of the hidden machines from the old-school Pokémon games, a really cool idea that characterizes more the different types of fairies, and also the overall level design. However, sometimes I found the exploration of some areas quite confusing, because the map isn't very clear at all, and like in the swamp, I went around in circles several times before understanding the right direction. It's really the worst area in the game, and by the way, right from the start, Amy can find hidden teleportation runes to use at any moment, even to return to her home in London, where only there she can manage the possessed fairies and organize her deck, and I found cute to see them fluttering around their rooms. Sometimes to continue the main quest I was forced to do unexpected things, like having to buy 5 crystals to exchange for Dunmore's teleportation rune, and later having to own some specific fairies to exchange or simply display to please someone who was blocking my way or that he had something I needed and wanted given. These are not really serious flaws, but I found these things to affect the pacing a little badly, and only towards the end I was obliged to possess at least 30 different fairies in order to be worthy of entering the endgame. And there I discovered a strange bug. Some of my fairies had not been included in the Pokédex, I meant in the fairy collection, but luckily it didn't create complications. Oh yes, I was forgetting. In Zenzera there are also the strangest elevators, which are activated by finding the elemental keys. Seriously, just look at this oddity.
What a weird idea, moving the platform with a screw. This must be the forgotten realm of clouds.
This is a story-driven game, but it doesn't lack secret areas where to find useful treasures, sometimes hidden behind doors which need keys obtainable by completing subquests. One of these involves the search and capture of the pixies, which are mischievous, laughing little brown creatures that prank people. There are in total 30 pixies, and the last ones are located in the very last dungeon. Every 5 calls, Lucius, the pixie hunter, will gift something useful, including the key to his cellar, which leads to a secret area. And graphically, Zenzera is a very inspired product, with well-detailed environments that recreate a fairy world in a fairly convincing way. Except the swamp. That fucking sucks. I was saying I particularly appreciated the Enchanted Forest, the Snowy Peaks, the Shadow Realm and the Realm of Clouds. However, the game shows its best in the rendering of the many fairies. Some of them are very curious. We have the classic ones, then these little devils, these little bears that are very cool, the dragons, this construct whose final form I love, and some fucking mushrooms. They're also well animated, a sign that the developers had a lot of passion in the project. On the other hand, the inhabitants of Zenzera never impressed me that much. Not that I mean they're bad looking, but when I watched closely some of them... well, never mind. Let's just say it's overly... decent. Now, talking about the sound compartment, Zenzera has beautiful and very inspired music, although the number of compositions is a bit limited. There's only one battle theme for the whole game, and also in many areas we'll hear natural sounds instead of musical tracks. During battles, we can hear that different types of fairies have distinct sets of sounds, like the flapping of wings, battle cries, and diversified victory shouts. It's all very neat. The characters seem to talk a sort of accented gibberish, which sometimes sounded like French in the case of the elves.
Bonjour, Sig, disais-la oui.
Oh, Sarkozy, Fapadis!
Di Sacron, di Tanabal, toi Montion.
Instead, the narrator of the prophecy and Amy speak in English, but Amy's voice actress didn't convince me much.
Threateningly, in the distance, she heard the roar of the waterfall. What?
I've got to go, Amy.
All right.
Technically, I encountered some small bugs, such as Amy who rarely went through the floors and ended up struck or fell into the void. Another one is the status frozen in battles, which persists even after being cured, and forces to reload the game. And lastly, there's the impossibility of alt-tabbing normally. See, it simply resets the current area, as if I had reloaded the game. Now, I'll tell you this frankly, I expected a much less polished game. Instead, it was very playable even on Windows 10. And speaking of annoying mechanics, I didn't like that in some places the dropped coins or objects by the defeated fairies will just fall into the void, or in mud, and in these spiral-shaped arenas the coins even clip inside this central pillar and become impossible to collect. Seriously, many times I wondered if this was done in purpose. I also found annoying that the spells from the slots cannot be removed, but only exchanged with others. My adventure in Zenzera lasted almost 28 hours, but only because I grinded a little too much, thinking it was necessary. The game allows to quickly level up in certain areas, where some fairies weak to certain elements spawn often, or against the trainer in Dunmore, which charges 60 coins per session, and these fairies don't even attack. Alternatively, we can buy the Golden Carrots, which will permit to level up the fairy at the cost of a single experience point, but they are quite expensive and will have to farm a lot of money. However, the game is not that difficult, except for a few battles. See, knowing how to build a perfect deck, equip the most useful spells, and exploit the Joker slots can make everything quite simple. In the end, I really liked Zenzera, though the story may not be anything special and has very few interesting twists, but I don't consider it a big problem. Anyone who loves Pokémon and wants to try something that has dared to imitate it and kinda succeeded showing a soul of its own, should try it. During my playthrough, I really felt how much passion the authors put into it, and it's a pity that it didn't meet the right success, which caused the cancellation of an expansion pack. I hope I have piqued your curiosity about this forgotten game, and I invite you to follow the development of the fan remake, which seems to be proceeding well. As always, a warm thanks to all viewers, and see you in the next entry.